Before the throne of God above, I have a strong and perfect plea, a great high priest whose name is love, whoever lives and pleads for me. My name is graven on his hands, my name is written on his heart. I know that while in heaven he stands, no tongue can bid me thence depart. No tongue can bid me thence depart. When Satan...
Hi everybody, this is Dan Stolbarger, and we're at a place that most likely you have not seen before, or maybe even heard about before. This is a place called Herodyon, and of all the palaces that Herod the Great constructed, this happens to be the largest of his palaces. We're south of Jerusalem, and we're really just east of Bethlehem. And this was, in a sense, his country club. We know that he had his escape fortress at Masada, and we know about Caesarea Maritime, where he created his own harbor, and of course the wonder of the world of the temple and the Temple Mount. But this here is where he chose to be buried. His burial tomb is here, and it was only discovered just a couple years ago. It was a big question as to where Herod's tomb was, and as I mentioned, just a couple years ago it was discovered. As you can see probably over my shoulder, Herod always seemed to have a swimming pool. In this weather, it's no surprise, but you can look down and you can actually see the pool that was used both as swimming as well as boating, and apparently he had kind of a swim-up bar in the middle there. But the reason that we've chosen this site is to talk about really four things. The first, of course, is over my shoulder. You're looking at Bethlehem. And so these are the shepherd's fields. And I want you to contrast in your mind now the opulence of Herod and his palace and the birthplace of the King of Kings in a cave beyond my shoulder on the right-hand side, and being born in a manger. So we kind of want to contrast richness, what truly makes a person rich or influential, and we'll contrast Herod and Jesus. The scriptures that we have for you, you'll see on the screen. We want you to read about the shepherd's fields, and of course we want you to read about, a verse that I've kind of picked out for you is from Matthew 2, because as we look out here, imagine what it was like when the wise men came and met with Herod, and he expressed an interest in wanting to come and worship the King of Kings, the babe born in a manger. But we also know that it was his plan to butcher and murder all the children. So as we sit here and look over those fields and we see Bethlehem in the background, I'm reminded of Matthew 2:1, where it says, "A voice was heard in Ramah, lamentations and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because they are no more." And so from this place looking down, I wonder if the screams could be heard here of the children in Bethlehem that were killed. And yet we know that an angel appeared to Joseph, and they were well on their way to Egypt at the time. The second thing that we want to talk about from this site, of course, is the fields behind us. Let's think Old Testament. These are the fields somewhere in this vicinity of Boaz. And so now we go back to the book of Ruth, and we remember that there was a famine in the land, And Naomi and her husband left with the boys, and they headed over to Moab, the mountains of Moab, which would be east of here, in order to hopefully find relief from the drought. And yet it's there that, of course, the boys marry, and we come to we get the introduction of Ruth. And so what better place to talk just a little bit about Ruth here, because as Naomi decided enough was enough when the kids and husband had died, that she now wanted to be called Mara, or bitter, and she's going to come back home, and she's ready to say goodbye to Oprah as well as Ruth. Here we read the tenaciousness of Ruth. And so let me just read Ruth 1:14 through 18. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Oprah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you, or to turn back from following you, for wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you lodge, I will lodge, and your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me." And when she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. You know, this is one of those moments of application. You know, Ruth wasn't just casual in her acquaintance. She clung to her, and she was tenacious. And she would have it no other way. And we know the story that Ruth meets Boaz, is married, and becomes part of the lineage of Jesus and the son of David himself, the King of Kings. Amazing to think about Ruth and her tenaciousness. And I guess I have a question for you. Is that, what are the things that you're tenacious about? What are those spiritual things that you will cling on to? Wherever you go, I'll go. Your people will be my people. It came at a great cost, because she left her family back in Moab, and she came to a town that she knew no one, and yet she was relentless. I love that phrase, tenacious and relentless. And I just wonder today, as believers in Yeshua, followers of Jesus, the Christ, the Messiah, how tenacious are we in doing that? Or is it just a casual relationship? And so we have the fields of the shepherds, we have the crying of the babies that were slaughtered, we have Rachel weeping for her children because they are no more, we have the tenaciousness of Ruth, all up here on top of Herodyon. And as we turn to the south, the little village on the hill that you're going to see in just a moment, I just want to point this out, is the village of Tekoa. And it was there that Amos came from. And of course, one of the hallmark verses from Amos for me is, "Prepare to meet thy God." And in this day and age, I hope that we're prepared to give an account of our lives as we meet our Lord. So with that, we're going to head to another spot up here at Herodyon and talk a little bit more about a couple other things, about moving mountains and about what true riches really are. So let's head on out. Hey everybody, this is Dan again. We're at the synagogue down inside of Herodyon. And I think that the one thing that we want to point out here is the contrast. Because we have contrasting the richness of Herod in his palace with, of course, the ministry of Jesus in his poverty. And so I think it's a good time for us just to take a look and think about what true riches really are from the scriptures. And so a couple familiar passages. I want to read from Matthew 6:19 through 21, where it says, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasure in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And then I want to read from Luke, another passage concerning riches. Again, one that I know that you're familiar with, but I'm going to read from Luke chapter 12, beginning in verse 13, where it says, Then one of the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who made me a judge or an arbitrator over you? And he said to them, Take heed and beware of covetousness. For one's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. And then he spoke a parable to them, saying, The ground of a certain rich man yielded plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, What shall I do, since I have no room to store my crops? And so he said, I will do this. I'll pull down my barns and build greater. And there I'll store all my crops and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, You fool, this night your soul will be required of you. Then whose will those things which you have labored for, who will they go to? And so is he who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. And I just want to take a moment and ask you, are you rich towards God? And what is true riches? Because the contrast here is we have Herod buried with all of his treasure. And it wasn't but a couple years ago that his body was discovered, or his tomb, and for centuries, no one ever remembered or thought much of Herod in his riches and in his power and as a builder. And then we have Jesus, who literally had very little, enough to live on, obviously, and yet his death and poverty, we set our calendars by his death. And so we have to define what true riches are. And in a world that it's easy for materialism to creep in and to define who we are by the stuff we own or have, in this day, God is calling his church back to what true riches are all about. And that's being rich in the things towards God. And one of your application questions is going to be, who's the richest person you know? And to define what true riches really are. So again, from this place, from Herod's temple, or his